What's up guys, ViperPV here, and today we are actually setting up the Raging Droner. We had it all built. I did a two-part series on building this little 6S racing quad. It was really definitely a challenging build because it is kind of hard to deal with. But now we're going to pretty much move over to Betaflight, and we're going to go ahead and flash it and set everything up. So real quick, let's go ahead and get down to Betaflight and show you guys how to set everything up. This is going to be a real in-depth view of Betaflight. So if you want more of an overview or just how to really just initially set up Betaflight 4.0 or whatever, I'll leave that down in the comment section below. This is going to be pretty much explaining every single little section of Betaflight so you know what it does and what it pretty much affects when you're changing settings in Betaflight. So let's go ahead and get to it. Alright, so now we're in the main page of Betaflight, and the first things you want to go ahead and do and install on your computer right after you install Betaflight is install these drivers right here. A lot of people won't install these and then they don't show their flight controller even showing up as a USB device. Make sure you put these on first. Also, if you installed these already and you're still not showing that your flight controller is showing on your computer, you don't hear the ding, go ahead and try to unplug all your USB devices on your computer and then try plugging it by itself. And if that doesn't work, also you can try a different USB cable. Usually all those little tips right there should be able to get you to connect to your flight controller with the micro USB. So first things first, let's go ahead and connect the flight controller to the USB after you install all those devices. And I'm going to click on, see it says shows up a COM port, which is COM 3. Yours might be different, COM 3, COM 1, COM 2, whatever the computer decides is the COM port. We're going to go ahead and go to the CLI tab. This is the tab pretty much where you can input commands and change settings. What we're going to do first is we're going to type in version. So I already flashed my flight controller with the newest version as of right now, which is the 4.0.3. And this right here is telling me my target right here. So I have the Xylo F4. Yours will come up with whatever you have. So do that first before you flash anything to make sure you have the correct target. And either write that down on a piece of paper or copy it into a notepad. I just remembered it's a Xylo F4. And then you can go ahead and just click disconnect because it's going to make you want to save it anyway. And disconnect back to it. Then go to CLI again. And then we're going to type in BL. That's pretty much bootloader. So we're putting it in bootloader mode, which shows up as DFU mode. And then we're going to come over here to the firmware flasher. Click on that, and you want to go ahead and either do releases and release candidates, or you can just do releases, that's fine, and then just pick whatever the newest one is for your flight controller. If you say, for instance, I picked maybe something a little older, you can see all the different versions of Betaflight you can flash on it, which is really nice if you want to go back, you know. But once you do that, just click on that. Click on load firmware online down here. It's going to load it. And then you want to go ahead and click on flash firmware. And I'm not going to do it. I already did mine. Mine's a fresh install. So once it's done flashing, then you can go ahead and get to it. So I'm going to go ahead and unplug my flight controller, get it out of DFU mode, and then plug it back in. So then we'll be on the same page. So I'm going to go ahead and go to the welcome page. And then we're going to go ahead and connect again. So right here, you're greeted to this screen right here. And if you took your quad and you moved it around, you can notice that it's moving with the quad. So when I point the nose forward, I'm going forward. When I go right, right, left, left, and back and back. This is the accelerometer working. And if you are going to ever be using like in a hover mode or using it in hover, not acro pretty much, where you don't use the accelerometer, if you need to use this in hover mode at all, you make sure that you want to calibrate your accelerometer and you want to put this on a level surface and click on that little button there, and then it'll calibrate the accelerometer for you. But since I mainly only fly in acro mode, which does not use the accelerometer, I usually just disable it. I usually skip this step. So if you're going to be using hover mode, click on calibrate accelerometer and make sure it's on a level surface. If not, then you don't have to worry about it. We can disable it to save some CPU load that shows it down here, or we can go ahead and leave it alone, and you can set up as a mode if you want to, if you're a beginner. Now clicking right here, we have our ports tab. This is where you're going to go ahead and set up like your receiver. So I know I have my receiver on UART3, and you're going to know that by what you connected your receiver to. So say you connected your receiver to UART1, you want to use that one. But since I'm using this one, I'm going to click on that. And then if you want to use smart audio, whatever receiver, whatever UART you use, so TX3, TX4, TX6, then you want to go ahead and come over here to smart audio. This is the TBS Unify version right there. If you wanted to use Tramp, you can click on that one. And then that's how you set up your remote control to be able to control your VTX. So I actually do not need to go ahead and set that up. I'm going to go ahead and go now to the configuration page. Now this is where you're mainly going to be setting up all of your little settings. Right here, this is your motor direction. So this motor right here is spinning this way, and this is motor 1. Then we have motor 2 spinning that way. So when we start setting up our motors, we want to make sure it matches this configuration. Now if you wanted to run reverse props, where it would actually swap them, and they say that it actually has a lot more benefit to this side. See how this side is pushing into the camera, well, this switching this will make it go away from the camera, and it's supposed to make you not go into trees or go into like brush or something like that, where the quad wants to kind of like eat the brush or whatever. It'll kind of push it away. So that's kind of a good metaphor, but that's up to you. I usually just leave it alone. I leave it as stock because I have a few quads and then I'll forget which one's what, so I leave that alone. Then right here on the right, we have our ESC protocol. Now this is going to be pretty much dependent on what kind of ESCs you have on your quad. Either if you're using BHeli32, you can go ahead and use DShot 1200. If you're using BHeli S's, some of them support DShot 300 and some of them support DShot 600. So I'd probably suggest either using DShot 600, 1200, or you can even use multi-shot, which is actually a faster protocol. It's pretty much just times DShot's digital signal, and it's able to tell your motors, like your ESC's going to say, well, I want 47% throttle, and that's exactly what will set each ESC to tell your motors. Like multi-shot is kind of like the old way. It's using a PWM pulse, so you actually have to calibrate all your ESCs together. But a lot of people, some people still do use multi-shot because it is a faster protocol where it's able to be, I guess, get more pulses to the motors and be able to be a little more efficient with how fast it can send data back and forth from the ESC to the motor and to the flight controller as well. But I like DShot 1200 since it is the faster of the DShot commands. It does make it a little smoother, and you also can get a little extra features like telemetry and everything else out of the BHeli 32 ESCs. Right here, you don't want to really worry about motor stop. No one uses motor stop anymore. That was something back in the day where you had your arming switch on actually on your sticks instead of using a switch. So I won't even bother even messing with that at all. Now this is your motor idle throttle value. Now when you're just arm your quad and it's just sitting there spinning the motors, this is how fast the motors are going to spin. And default of 5.5 is okay. I actually like to have it down a little bit, down to like 5. You can play around with this. If you're noticing that your motors aren't spinning, like they're kind of like glitching, turn this up. If they're you can also, if they're spinning fine, you might even want to try turning it down. The lower it has, it's really dependent on how you like your quad to feel. So 5.5 is probably fine. I like to have mine at 5, even 4.5 on different quads. So I'll see how it is and change it. But 5 should be perfect. And then right here on the right, we have our board and sensor alignment. Now remember the first part we had. I'm going to go ahead and click save and reboot real quick and go right back to it. Let's see here. Let's go and let COM3 connect. Remember this part right here we had where we were moving around? If you see that your quad is you going forward and is going backwards or going right and going totally not what you're doing with your hand with the quad, then you want to come over here to the configuration page and you want to go ahead and change right here. This is where you want to change it, or over here. Actually, I probably prefer you probably change this side. So if you have your board rotated wrong, you can go ahead and put it 90 degrees, 180 degrees, whatever way you want to go ahead and do it. I'm not going to do it since mine's perfect, but play with it, go back, save it, reboot, go back to the setup page, make sure it's exactly right. If it is not, it's going to freak out on you when you try to arm. So make sure that is perfect before you go ahead and arm it, and just go back from the setup page to the configuration page and do that. Now over here we have our update frequency. Now the highest that Betaflight now supports is AK, so this is actually fine, and we're going to leave that alone. I do usually disable my accelerometer, so after you go ahead and set up your angles in the setup page and also over here, then you can go ahead and click on the accelerometer off if you're not going to use any hover modes or anything like that. If you're using hover modes as a safety precaution, if you're just new to the hobby, then don't disable it, leave it on. It won't hurt anything, especially since you're most likely probably using an F4 flight controller. The CPU load shouldn't be a problem. But I'm going to go ahead and click on save and reboot. And then I'm going to go ahead and, oh, it's COM3 already. And now, look, since I disabled the accelerometer, it does not move anymore. I'm moving the quad around. It's not doing nothing. So that's that. Now we want to go ahead and go back to the configuration page again. And right here is where you can go ahead and put in your craft name. So for instance, this is my Raging Droner. So I'm just going to put Raging in here. And you'll see that on the OSD when we get to it. Then we're going to go ahead and go down here. This is your receiver protocol. Since I am using Crossfire, I have it as S-Bus receiver and then Crossfire. If you're using FreeSky, you're going to use the S-Bus receiver as well, same serial-based receiver. And just click on either FreeSky F-Port, depending on what you're using, or you can go ahead and use S-Bus. So most likely you'll probably use S-Bus if this is especially a beginner quad that you're using. So, and then click on that, click Save and Reboot, and then you're done there. Then right here we have all our little settings that we can use. Everything in here is pretty much everything you're going to use. This right here, in-flight accelerometer calibration, if you want to go ahead and calibrate your accelerometer while you're in flight, you can click on this and set up it as a switch. Servo tilt, you will never probably need this doing it on a racing drone unless you're using like a tricopter or something that has like a tilting servo for one of the motors. Soft serial, now if you don't have enough UARTs on your flight controller, you actually might want to use this. And I actually do have an old video that I did maybe over a year ago about enabling soft serial, which I might even put that down below as well. It has not changed over the year. So I'll go ahead and link that down below to explain more what soft serial is, but pretty much you can like use your LED pad as another S-Bus, or not an S-Bus, but another UART on your flight controller, so then you have additional UARTs. That's pretty much sums up what it is. Sonar, that's pretty much self-explanatory. Telemetry, this is what's going to be able to send data to your radio or to whatever you're using, like your radio or your OSD. Like if you're using a Crossfire telemetry, you want to make sure you have that enabled. I had mine enabled. LED strip, if you want to use RGB LED strips, you want to go ahead and enable that. This is the OLED screen display, which I'm really not too familiar with. I think this has to do something with maybe an actually OLED screen on the flight controller itself, possibly. I'm not 100% certain on this one. Channel forwarding, we can forward aux channels to servo outputs. We don't have to worry about that unless you're using maybe a wing or something like that. Transponder, this is a race transponder. No one really uses race transponders anymore. Everything has moved over to the VTX transponder system, which is so much cheaper for the racers. It's kind of expensive, but even it was expensive too for the race organizers as well with the transponders too. So I mean, either way, I think the new way we have, so you don't have to really worry about click on that on or off. Then we also have air mode. This is what pretty much is going to be able to, when you do flips and rolls, keep your motors on instead of having them off. So when you arm the quad, it is going to have the motor spinning. So you have to be careful that they're not going to be off. They're going to be on. But I would definitely suggest having this on. This is your onboard OSD, which you can have that on as well. Your ESC sensors. So if you're using BHeli32 like I am, you can go ahead and enable this as well. So you can get telemetry from your ESCs to your flight controller as well. Anti-gravity, this is pretty much what helps it have nose bobs when you give it like really fast throttle inputs. If you do a lot of fast throttle inputs. They'll keep the nose from bobbing up and down, and you can increase this or decrease this as necessary. Dynamic filter, you want to definitely leave this on. This is one of the new, not new, but they've been making a lot of changes to the dynamic filter over a little bit to improve performance as well as filtering. It's pretty much just filters the noise in the system. And then down here we have all our little beeper configurations that you can use. Don't really have to worry about. You can leave them all enabled or just pick the ones that you want, so you can just kind of read it and do that. I do like to have my beeper on my motors, so I'm going to go receive set. Yep, so my aux channel is set for beep. I'm going to go ahead and click save and reboot. All right, and then let's go ahead and go to the next page. Power and battery. I don't usually change anything in here because it's going to pretty much tell you the minimum cell voltage of 3.3. It's pretty much going to start setting a beeper. If you have a beeper on your quad, it'll beep when it gets to these voltages. It also will flash on your OSD, like warnings and stuff saying your battery is going low or battery critical. So if you need to change this up and down, I usually just leave it alone. I just go off my OSD or my radio of what it's telling me on my voltage. So change it if you want, change it if you don't want to, or if you don't want to, it's up to you. But I'll leave it as default, especially if you're a beginner. It's probably fine. And then we're going to go ahead and go to the PID tuning tab. Now, right here we have a few things here. We have our profile page, which I'm not sure why it's on profile 3 and why this is on rate profile 1, but we're going to put those back to 1 and 1. And what we want to go ahead and do here and look here, this is going to be your roll rates, your pitch, and your yaw. And then we have our D-mins, which is another tuning thing we can do. And then we have our feed forward transition, acro trainer angle limits, throttle boost, absolute control, I-term rotation, VBET, PID compensation, smart feed forward, I-term relax, integrated yaw. And then anti-gravity mode right here we talked about before. So first thing I do here in this tab is I change my rates. Now these are the rates that I like to use. These will all be up to you how you want to do them. I like to have mine kind of snappy, but this is going to be a racing quad, so I do have it a little lower than I usually do. And that's about, let me fix that. I do, usually I do 1.05, 0.79, and then 0.30, but what I usually been doing on my racing quad is lowering it a little bit down to 800 degrees per second. Feels like it feels a little better when especially when I'm flying. So this one, yeah, 875 right there, 76, 875. That's perfect. So what did I change here? So right here, you don't have to worry about changing these, the P, the I, and the D. Don't really have to mess with this until we actually start flying the quad. I'll leave that alone. Feed forward, that's pretty much going to get you your stick feel. So when you make a move on your transmitter, it's pretty much how fast a quad's going to react to that, or how fast it's going to accelerate into that stick position. Then we have our RC rate, which if you see this thing right here, this is really where our RC rate, our super rate, and our RC expo change. Now, the more super rate you give it, the more it's going to go, the endpoints are going to go up higher and higher and higher above 1,000 degrees per second. I believe the RC rate here is what kind of will change also the curve in the here in the right here around in the middle. And then we also have our RC expo, which also will smooth out in the middle, but then exponentially get deeper as it goes to the end. So as you see, I have kind of some nice stick feel in the middle, and then as I get more into my stick, it gets really sharp, and then I have the full 875 degrees a second at the end of the stick. So that's how that works. Then we also have down here this D-min. This is pretty much the same thing as D right here, but now instead of it being this all the time, when you're just flying just normally, it's going to use these values, and then when you do really hard moves and hard maneuvers, it's going to start boosting them up to these values right here. And then we have the feed forward transition, which is feeds over to this, and then we also have acro trailer, so I'm not going to go over that too much. Throttle boost, we can also add that too, and it kind of gives you an explanation. Temporal light boosts the throttle on quick stick movements. I like to leave it as default. I don't really mess with that too much. Some people do. And then we have I-term rotation, which increases the, actually, rotates the current I-term vector properly to other axes. The quad rotates when yawing continuously. Really don't need to mess with that too much. And then we have smart feed forward. I don't mess with that too much either because it kind of divides on how it figures out the algorithm. As you see, it kind of gets complicated. You don't have to really worry about that too much. Then we have I-term relax. I have it as roll and pitch. That's the default. And set point is perfect. Then we have an anti-gravity mode, which I said this is pretty much controlling those bobs when you give it a lot of fast throttle inputs. The higher this value, the more it's going to increase the I on those values and try to reduce them. The less it's going to maybe increase them, so you can have more bobble. Just leave it as default. If you start noticing you have a lot of bobble, raise this up, then you can go from there. Then we also have our throttle and our throttle expo. I leave mine linear. I like mine a throttle, linear throttle. I don't like any surprises in any part of the band. But some people with maybe like a 3S quad that wants to fly in the house, they can go ahead and mess with this to where they have a lot of stick travel when they're going up and down the throttle. And then we have TPA, which will pretty much reduce the PIDs as you increase throttle. And then you see here 1500. I leave all this fine alone until I fly it and see how it flies and see what I need to do to it. So I suggest you do the same thing. So when you're done in here, you can click on save. And also too, before I go, these are your profiles. You can actually set different rate profiles and then put them on a switch. Same thing, I see the rate profile, you have 6 of them. And then you also can have 3 different PID profiles as well and put them on the switch as well. If you wanted, maybe have a 4S quad and a 6S quad for, you know, the same quad, but it's using different batteries. You can play with the PIDs there. This is our receiver tab. Now let me go ahead and get my radio. Let me turn it on real quick. And once it wants to turn on. And first thing I'm going to go ahead and do over here is put this as aux 8. I believe, yep, that's perfect. So what I do just there? Well, as you notice, I turned my radio on. Aux 8 just shot all the way up to 2000. Well, that's because that's my RSSI channel I have set at my radio. And I do have a video on the Crossfire version, which I am going to be doing a FreeSky one as well in the future. But I can leave that down and link below of how to set that up. And you just pretty much set your aux 8 there. And then it's going to give you the OSD in your goggles. Now, also, as you notice, I'm moving the sticks. I'm moving my roll stick to the right. Moving, you see the little quad right there on the right, right here. And you can see that I'm moving right, moving left, moving front, moving back. Doesn't do throttle at all, but yaw does. Works. So if you don't see this when this is moving, you know, make sure that your ports or your receiver tab is set up correctly, or your configuration tab is set up correctly. Once you do see this, most likely it's not going to be right. You're going to move your throttle stick and the roll might move, or the pitch might move. Well, come over here to the channel map and either click FreeSky, Spectrum, whatever one, and click on that. So mine, I know my default layout on my radio is TAER 1234. So when I move my throttle, which is channel 1, it's moving the throttle. When I'm moving my aileron, which is roll, it's moving the aileron. And then when I control elevator, which is pitch, it moves the pitch one. And then we have rudder, which is yaw. So right there. And then if you notice as well, when I put my stick to the bottom, like on throttle, it's 1000. When I put my stick to the top, it's 2001. It's kind of hard to get it to 2000, but that's close enough. You pretty much want your values at 1000, 2000, and you need to change that in your radio, and I'll leave a link down below to a really great video on how to set up your stick endpoints to where they're perfect. And if you notice too, when I have my stick centered, it's at 1500, kind of floating around 1499 and 1500. That's okay. Shouldn't really mess anything up. But you want to have it as 1500 as possible, so then when you're not stick touching anything, no exact yaw or nothing is moving on you to cause like a drift or something like that. So once you have all that set up, you can go ahead and click on save. And right here, just pretty much telling you that I won't touch really any of this stuff at all, just leave it alone. And then we have our modes tab. This is where we can go ahead and set up our arming switch and whatnot. So I'm gonna go ahead and click on add range. I'm gonna go ahead and click on my arming switch. See how mine automatically went to aux 1 and a little nub here. going to go ahead and move that over. I'm going to click on save. So now I have my arm switch on aux 1. I also use beeper. So I'm going to go ahead and click on that. And I'm going to move that over. Most likely it's going to be the same exact position. And then I'm going to move that to that. So that's on aux 3. I'm going to click on save, even though I can do this all together. And then we can go ahead and go over to, see here, launch, not launch control. Where is it? Flip over after crash. Add, let's see here, add a range. And then I'm going to go ahead and click on that switch. That's my aux 2. And then I'm going to switch that too. And I do have a video too on how to set up switches so they actually show up, because sometimes when you first get a radio, when you move your switches, they're not going to do nothing. You have to actually set them up in your radio itself to be able to know what's what. So once you have all your switches set up, you're pretty much done there. And then we can go over to the motors tab. And we can go ahead and check to see if our motors are spinning the right way according to this diagram. So I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to connect the battery up. Make sure your props are definitely off for this step, or you're going to be really hurting when those things take off on you and hurt you. So I'm going to go ahead and connect the battery up. I'm going to click on I understand. I removed my props. And then I'm going to go ahead and click on master. And it's spinning all the motors. And then what I'm doing right now is I'm checking the motor direction according to these ones right here. So I have this one right here, and my motor 1 is spinning wrong. My motor 2 is spinning right. My motor 3 is wrong. My motor 4 is right. So the 2 and the 4 is right, and the 1 and the 3 is wrong. So we actually have to reverse those, and we'll do that in actually another program, which we'll get to really quick in a second. So I'm going to go ahead and disconnect it. Actually, before I do that, let me go ahead and shut these off. Let's make sure that everything is on the right one. So when I spin motor 1, this motor should spin. That's right. Motor 2 should spin. Motor 3 should spin. And motor 4 should spin. So all of them are spinning, and that's good. So all I know is I need to change motor 1 and motor 3. So I'm going to go ahead and unclick that. I'm going to disconnect my battery for a second. And then we're going to go ahead and exit out of Betaflight real quick. Now what we're going to go ahead and do is go to BHeli32 configurator download. And we want to go ahead and download the BHeli32 configurator. That's not the right one. We want to find this one. Okay, so you want to go ahead and download it from here. BHeli32 if you're using BHeli32 ESCs. If you're using BHeli S, then you want to go ahead and go to this one, BHeli configurator, right here. Since I already downloaded this, let me go ahead and pull it up on my computer. BHeli32. If it can find it for me, maybe not. Let's see. I know I have it in here. Right there. All right, so we have it pulled up right here. We're gonna go ahead and do is, no, I don't want to update it right now. I'm gonna go ahead and connect to the flight controller. It's gonna be pretty much do a pass through from the flight controller to the ESCs itself. And then you want to go ahead and do is connect the battery. And then we're going to go ahead and click on read setup. All right, so it listed all of them perfect. Even though it's a 4-in-1 ESC, it still individually lists them. And we're on 3.26, which I don't believe there's an update. Let me check. Do we have an update? No. No, I guess not. So maybe there is, but I'm not doing that right now. That's fine. So pretty much we are in here. What I'm going to do is I unclick those. So now I'm just looking at ESC number 1. I know I had to reverse this channel. So I'm going to click on reverse right here. And then we're going to go ahead. I'm going to actually change the PWM frequency to 48. It actually does help make smoother motors, maybe even reduce the heat in the motors. So I'll definitely suggest at least changing that one option. And then if you need to reverse your motors, do that. So I'm going to go ahead and do is write setup right there. So I'm going to write it. And then we had motor 3, 2, we had to reverse. And we're going to make that 48 kilohertz as well. And then we're going to go back to 2, 48, right setup, 4, 48, right setup. And I do actually have an entire video on BHeli32, which I'll leave that down a link down below as well about all these settings and what to change and why. So I will leave that down a link below, but that's pretty much all we are done here in this. We can go to the motors tab real quick if you want, and we can make sure that our changes took effect. So I want to go ahead and do motor, and this is spinning to the right, left, left, and right. So yep, they're all perfect now. So I'm done in BHeli32, so we can close that out. I can close that out, and then let's go back to Betaflight. So we got our motor set up. We got pretty much a lot of things set up right now, so that's really cool. So I'm going to go ahead and disconnect the battery, and then we're going to go ahead and go to the OSD. And right here, now I am actually using a TBS Evo, so I'm actually not using this OSD, but I will show you guys how to set this up real quick. Now this is the main screen you'll have, and these are all the little settings that you can go ahead and add to your screen if you want to. So I don't really like to have the logo there, so I'm going to shut that off. And I like to have, like, usually I used to use my RSSI value, RSSI, main battery voltage, and then maybe a timer. And then also maybe my craft name as well. So when you have all that down, you can just click on this, drag it around. Most likely you'll have to have your goggles on, having video, and to see where you want it on your screen. So I know like I have mine like around here to somewhat kind of like that in a way. But you kind of get the hint of how to set up to really just drag and drop. And at the end of the flight too, you can have post statistic flights, and you can click on these or unlink these, whatever you want to do. You also have your warnings, like say right here it says low voltage, so if my batteries go low, it'll tell me low voltage. Then you also can have different warnings as well, like maybe your quad's on arming. Definitely have your arming status on here. I believe it's under battery critical, arming disabled. It must be, this is it right here, arming disabled. So it'll tell you why your arming is disabled right there. Maybe it's throttle position's too high or something like that. So, and then right here you have 3 different sections. That's pretty much to have different profiles, which you can set up to in your modes tab on what you want to do. But once you're all done here, you click on save. And then we have our black box, which I'm not going to go into. A lot of black box was kind of a cool thing, you know, a year ago or so. A lot of people still do use it. I don't really use black box very much at all. I did use it quite a bit about a year ago. Quads fly so good now, you really don't need to go into it and try to get every little 1% of performance out of it. Some people do, some people don't. I don't like messing with it and losing sleep over it, so I don't even mess with it. But that's pretty much it. It's pretty much a data recorder, and you can pull information off of your flight controller or a SD card and be able to analyze how your quad is doing, the noise levels, and everything else. And then we can go ahead and go over to our CLI tab. This is what we pretty much started off with. And say, for instance, you want to make a backup of your quad. Click on dump, and it'll pretty much dump every single setting in here, and you can pretty much copy all this, copy to a notepad, save it as backup, Raging Droner, or whatever quad you're building, a Rooster, whatever, and then you have a backup of it if you ever did lose it, or maybe you destroyed your flight controller, get another flight controller, load those on, and you should be good to go. Also, you can also do this too, which is also another way. This pretty much lists all the commands and everything on the flight controller that was changed or not changed. If you just type in diff, this is pretty much, we'll just show you what you actually changed. Anything that was changed from the defaults, this is what this lists, so you can actually save this as a backup too if you want to, instead of doing the other one. But yeah, so let me go ahead and go back up to here, because it's going to want you to save it. So that's it, pretty much setting up a quad in Betaflight and kind of doing a big overview of what everything is and any questions you guys might have, leave it down in the comments. I like to answer any questions you guys have. I'm here to help you guys get flying, get in the air, and enjoy yourself, enjoy your quad, enjoy life, enjoy the outside. That's pretty much it. So I'll see you guys in a future video. Peace.